I thought I could handle two women. I was wrong. My name is David R. Walker. I am 39 years old, living in a peaceful suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. I am a civil engineer, married for 11 years to my wife, Amanda, a high school teacher, a kind, gentle woman who always loved me with all her heart. We have two children, Lily 9 and Jake 6, a perfectly American dream family, if viewed from the outside. But inside me, something had died long ago. It all started last fall when my company took on a construction project in Raleigh, about a 2.5-hour drive from my home. I was assigned as the team leader, meaning I would have to work on site at least 3 days a week. Amanda was worried, but I reassured her that everything would be fine, that I would be home on weekends and video call every night. She believed me, always believed me. I rented a short-term apartment near the construction site, a quiet place with a balcony overlooking an artificial lake. I distinctly remember my first night there. I sat alone on the couch, opened a can of beer, looked at the still water, and felt free. Not free from my family, but a sense of escape from all responsibilities, all roles as a husband, a father. And then I asked myself, am I still myself? 3 weeks later, I met her, Sierra Monroe, 29, the construction safety supervisor, dark brown hair, sharp eyes that turned surprisingly gentle when she smiled. She had a slightly husky voice from cigarettes, was often sarcastic, and spoke intelligently. We started as just colleagues, simple jokes, shared site inspections, then quick lunches at food trucks. I began looking forward to my workdays in Raleigh more and more. I found myself smiling more, feeling alive. One Friday evening, it rained heavily, and I couldn't drive back to Charlotte because the roads were flooded. Amanda called asking how I was, and I lied smoothly that the company had kept me for urgent work. After the call, I texted Sierra, "Do you have any alcohol?" The moment I knocked on her apartment door that night, I knew I had crossed a point of no return. I vividly remember the first time I felt myself stepping into dangerous territory. It wasn't when I touched her. It wasn't when we kissed in the car. It was on a normal morning in the office. Rachel and I worked at the same law firm downtown Seattle. I was the deputy head of corporate legal consulting, and she was the new assistant to the head of HR. There were over 80 people in the office, but just a few days after she started, I already knew her name. Not because I was her boss, but because of that look in her eyes. Rachel had a smile that made others pause for a second. There was something about her that made me feel seen, as if in the bustling crowd, only she noticed I existed. I was 39 when I met her. I had been married for almost 11 years. My wife, Amanda, was a good woman. We had two children, lived in the Ballard neighborhood, a 2-story house with a small backyard. Rationally, I lacked nothing, but something inside me had died long ago that I dared not name. I used to think it was responsibility or maturity, but in reality, it was a feeling of loneliness, emptiness, as if I was living someone else's life, not my own. One time, Rachel came to my desk with a contract that needed a signature. Her hand gently brushed mine as she handed me the file. Just a light touch. But that whole afternoon, I couldn't focus on anything else. That's when I knew I was standing on the edge. But I didn't step back. Elise and I moved into a small apartment in the Lakeview area near downtown Chicago, a 2-bedroom apartment. Nothing luxurious, just compact enough for two people to live comfortably without having to tiptoe around each other. We told everyone we were roommates. Neither our neighbors nor her colleagues suspected much, because to them, I was just a divorced guy trying to start over. In the mornings, we drank coffee together. Elise liked to brew French press, while I just needed something strong. We'd watch the news together, discuss the day's happenings. Some days she'd head to the hospital before me. Some days I'd leave for work first. But every evening, I would return to her side. We learned to exist as a couple who never had a wedding, no rings, no vows, just a silent agreement that we belonged to each other, at least until the world found out. But nothing stays hidden forever. One evening, Elise came home late, her face pale. I was washing dishes when she pulled me to sit down at the table. "Elena knows," she said. I felt as if someone had poured a bucket of cold water over my head. "What did she say?" Elena said if I don't stop, she'll tell your wife. She happened to see you with me at Whole Foods the other day. She said she couldn't believe her eyes. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my forehead. Elena was Elise's older sister. She lived in Evanston, less than 10 miles from our apartment. I should have been more careful. Elise, if this gets out, I'll lose custody of my kids, I said, my voice hoarse. It's not that I'm afraid, but I know Amanda won't let it go. Elise took my hand. I know. I don't want everything to blow up either, but I'm tired of hiding. I love you, but I can't live like a shadow forever. That sentence haunted me all night. I don't know if this feeling is guilt anymore. It's like something between desire and emptiness. There were nights I lay next to Emily, my lawful wife, and Sarah's image kept appearing like a ghost. It wasn't because she was more beautiful, or because what we did was too intense, but because with her, I felt like I could be honest. Sarah and I started meeting more often. Initially, it was after work, under the pretext of staying at the company to finish reports. Later, it was furtive lunch breaks in the car, in motels near JFK Airport, where few people knew us. I knew every freckle on her body, every way she tensed up when I whispered something. We even gave each other nicknames, as if we were living in a completely different world. One day, while Sarah and I were sitting in her car parked near Prospect Park, I looked at her and said, "How long are we going to keep doing this?" She was silent for a long moment, then turned to me, eyes welling up, "Until one of us is brave enough to tell the truth." I remember laughing, a tired, bitter laugh. I wasn't brave. I was a professional liar. A man who could stand before the altar in St. Augustine's Church in Brooklyn and swear vows to God, then a few years later whisper, "I love you" to another woman in a car. But every secret has a price. I didn't expect the price to come so quickly. That evening, I came home late. Emily was sitting on the sofa, her eyes tired, holding her usual mug of peppermint tea. Only one small light was on in the living room, casting a shadow that made her face look sadder than usual. I looked at my wife and realized, how long had it been since I truly saw her with my eyes like that? "Another meeting?" Emily asked, her voice soft but colder than usual. Just end of quarter stuff," I replied, taking off my coat and hanging it up. She didn't ask anything further. That's what scared me. In the old days, Emily would rattle off 10 questions in a row, joking, teasing me to sit down and tell her all the details. Now she just looked at me as if I were a guest in our own home. I went into the bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror. That face, a man in his late 30s, with a stable job, a good wife, was living two lives at once. One life of stability, responsibility, and another life of passion, lies, and escape. I got into bed lying next to Emily. She had her back to me. I wanted to put my arm around her, but my hand stopped in midair and then fell, like a kite with a broken string. I felt cowardly. The next day, Sarah sent me a message. "I think I'm in love with you." I read that message while standing in front of the company elevator. It felt as if the entire office hallway swayed. Sarah had never used that word before. The word love, a simple word, but when placed in the wrong context, it could become an atomic bomb. I didn't reply immediately. All day I couldn't get any work done. I remembered Emily's eyes last night, recalled the secret dates, the furtive messages, and found myself stuck between two women. One was home, and one was a dream. That night I texted Sarah. "We need to talk, but not at the motel, not in the car. Meet me at the old coffee shop on Flatbush, 7 p.m. When Sarah arrived, she was wearing a beige turtleneck sweater, her hair tied up, her eyes slightly dark from lack of sleep. I knew she had been crying. She sat down, saying nothing. I took a breath, then began. "I don't know if this is love or just compensation for what I lack at home, but I know if we continue like this, we will destroy all three of us." Sarah stared at me intensely. I had never seen her so fragile. "What about me then? What am I in this story? A discarded third?" I didn't know how to answer. We sat in silence for 10 minutes. Finally, she just said, "If you choose her, be honest with her. Don't let her find out from someone else. She doesn't deserve that." I nodded. That was the last time I saw Sarah. Jokroy, Jaila bandit, tingan kwa joan truyen banvua kungkap. Toijan ko gangdik mot cash mot mavatu nien haje fu hop cho viechoyen joy tangyong noi. After the last meeting with Sarah, I felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from my chest. But just like quitting cigarettes or alcohol, the addiction didn't disappear immediately. It was still there, lurking. I had grown accustomed to having Sarah on the periphery of my life, accustomed to the morning texts, the midday glances, the hurried but fiery touches, accustomed to the feeling of being desired, of escaping the role of the exemplary husband. But now it was over. A week passed. I cleaned up everything, deleted texts, emails, removed photos from iCloud, blocked Facebook, Instagram. I erased traces like a tech criminal. But I knew even if I erased everything online, in my heart, she remained. A part of me was still a traitor. I thought Emily didn't know. She seemed normal, even somewhat relieved. But I forgot one thing. Women don't need explicit proof to feel a change. On Thursday evening, Emily knocked on my study door while I was working on a report. "Can I ask you something?" I turned around. "Of course." She held out her phone to me. On the screen was an unsent email. Subject, "From Sarah." I felt the blood drain from my face. Emily looked at me, her eyes red. "I didn't read the whole thing, just the first line. I want to hear it from you, not from her." I swallowed hard. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm not sure. I had no solid proof, but I felt it. Every hug, every touch of yours changed. You came home later, quieter. You stopped noticing I like coffee with coconut cream. That's when I knew, even if I didn't know with whom." I sighed, took off my glasses and said, "I ended it. A week ago. I was going to tell you. But every time I saw you, I didn't know where to begin. Then tell me now, right now." I recounted everything, from beginning to end. How I met Sarah, how I felt, how it started, and why I didn't stop sooner. I hid nothing. If this was the moment to lose everything, I would let her lose it for a complete truth, not a gentle lie. Emily didn't cry. She just sat still, her hands gripping the edge of the chair. Finally, she said, "Do you still love me?" I looked at her, the wife I once loved so deeply, the one I had betrayed. "Yes, but I think I've forgotten how to show it." Emily stood up, walked towards the door. "For now, I'm going to my mother's house. Not to leave you, but to think. I need time. And maybe you do too." 3 days later, the house felt empty. No sound of the fridge opening in the middle of the night. No washing machine humming. No one reminding me to take my vitamins every morning. I walked into the bedroom, looked at the pillow next to me, still creased, and for the first time, I broke down crying. Not because I lost Sarah, but because I was losing my wife, the only person who had never abandoned me, no matter who I was. A month after Emily returned, we gradually found a different version of each other. Not perfect, no longer illusory, but more real. The intimacy between us no longer came from habit, but from choice. We chose to stay, chose to try, chose to confront. But there was one thing we hadn't truly touched upon, the matter with Sarah. I was no longer in contact with Sarah. The last text I sent was, "I told her everything. Please don't reach out again." Sarah only replied, "I won't, I'm sorry." And that was it. But one early autumn afternoon, I was standing in line at a coffee shop in Midtown when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Matt?" I turned around. It was Sarah. Wearing a gray coat, hair tied up, still the eyes that had once captivated me in a San Diego bar, and also the eyes that had almost cost me everything. I nodded. "Hey, can we talk?" I looked down at my hand, the coffee I had already bought. Then I looked at her. "There's nothing left to talk about." Sarah nodded slightly. No tears, no smile, no reproach. I hope you're okay." I replied, "I am." But I almost wasn't, and I walked away without looking back. That evening, Emily asked, "Anything unusual today?" I thought for a moment. I saw Sarah again. She showed no surprise, no anger. Just asked, "Did you say anything?" I told her there was nothing left to say. Emily looked at me for a long time. Then she turned away, whispering, "I'm not asking because I'm jealous. I just want to be sure you didn't back down." Trust is not something you build once and for all. It's a house that needs cleaning, repairing, patching every day. We continued therapy. Some days I cried because Emily revisited the wounds I had caused. Some days Emily cried because she realized that, in some part, she had also neglected me without knowing. Our love was no longer movie-like love. No roses, no romantic cliches. It was the love of two people who had failed, trying not to fail again. A year after the wound was exposed, we remarried. Simple, private, inviting only 20 people. Not my parents, not Sarah. We didn't do it to erase the past, but to mark a new beginning, a true one. When the pastor asked, "Do you promise to choose this person every day, even when it's easiest to walk away?" I replied, "I do. I know how it feels to almost lose her." Emily didn't forgive me with just a word, and I didn't atone with just a renewed wedding. We fell in love again, not because of romance, but because of courage. A year after everything fell apart, I imagined things would be fine. That if I tried hard enough, Emily would smile like before. That there would be a morning when I'd wake up and no longer remember having shattered that woman's trust. But the truth was, there was no such milestone. Things gradually returned to normal, but not the old normal, rather a new kind of normal. Emily no longer checked my phone, but I knew she still watched every time I held it. I no longer lied, but still felt guilty whenever I was 10 minutes late for work. We still made love, but now, after every touch, there was a long glance to ensure the other person was still there, both physically and spiritually. Life went on. I changed companies, not because of Sarah, but because I wanted to escape everything that reminded me of it. Emily went back to school, getting a certificate in child psychology, something she had set aside because she was too busy being my wife. We learned to become new people, not to please each other, but to avoid losing ourselves again. One winter evening in Denver, I asked her, "Have you ever thought, if that hadn't happened, would we be happier?" Emily was silent for a moment, then replied, "No. If that hadn't happened, you would still be someone I couldn't reach." I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" "It means you used to love me out of responsibility, not presence. You were there, but I always felt alone." And when I heard that, I understood that my betrayal wasn't when I slept with Sarah. The real betrayal was the days I was physically home, but my mind was elsewhere. It was the evenings I scrolled through emails while she wanted a hug. It was the times I said, "I'm tired," when all she needed was a glance, an embrace, a question, "Are you okay today?" We didn't stay together because we overcame the pain. We stayed because we learned to accept that we ourselves had caused that pain and then dedicated the rest of our lives to making amends without hoping to be forgotten. Some couples break up because of infidelity. Some couples become stronger from it. And then there's us, somewhere in between, where love isn't a dazzling light, but a small candle sheltered by two trembling hands. If you wish, Part 9 will be a deeper dive into our new life 5 years later, when the past is no longer a wound, but a scar. No longer painful, but never disappearing. Would you like me to continue writing? 5 years have passed since the day I personally tore my marriage apart. We are still together, still living in the old house in Denver, now repainted in gray-white, still using the worn-out sofa that once witnessed sleepless nights filled with tears and anger. But now it's also where Emily lies reading, and I lie beside her, listening to soft jazz on a quiet afternoon. There are things that seemed irreparable, but time, if accompanied by honesty and effort, can mend them. Sarah now lives in Oregon. We are no longer in contact. The last I heard about her was from an old colleague who said she had gotten married. I'm not sure what my feelings were upon hearing that. Just a fleeting emptiness. Then it disappeared, as if an old chapter was being closed with necessary silence. Emily no longer talks about that incident, not because she has forgotten, but because it no longer occupies the space between us as it once did. Some nights I still wake up at 2 a.m., not from nightmares, but from a vague worry. Am I good enough to keep this woman? I'll look over, see Emily still lying there, breathing steadily. I don't touch her. I just whisper, almost in prayer, "Thank you for staying." We have a daughter. Emily got pregnant after many attempts. We named our child Grace, a favor or blessing, because her existence is a gift I never thought I deserved. Once looking at Emily holding our sleeping child, I asked myself, if I hadn't broken everything that day, would I appreciate this moment so much? I'm not sure. I am no longer the man I once was. No longer the successful but cold person, always thinking that emotions could be postponed until after success. I learned to listen, learned to put my phone down when someone was talking, learned to apologize when wrong instead of finding excuses. And most importantly, I learned to be honest, even when it made me feel vulnerable. There's a quote I read, "The wound is where the light enters you." Emily once couldn't look at me without seeing my betrayal, and I once couldn't look at her without seeing guilt overshadowing everything. Now we look at each other and see something different, our true selves, imperfect, not pristine, but having chosen to love each other again, for the second time, slowly, unadorned, in a way that doesn't need to be romantic, just real enough. Love is not about making no mistakes. Love is when you have every reason to leave, but still choose to stay. I still keep a journal. At the end of the most recent page, I wrote, "Maybe I don't deserve forgiveness, but I will live every day as if I have to prove that I have learned something from that pain. Tuyat voy jai la bandishtieng an kua joan truyen banvua kungkap. Toy jan ko gangdik mot kash mot mava tunien hatchefu hop chovik chuyen joy than gyong noi." Grace turned 7 this spring. One Sunday morning, as I was fixing an old bicycle in the garage, she walked in with messy hair, holding a picture book she had just finished reading. She sat down next to me, silent for a while, then asked, "Daddy, why didn't you and Mommy live separately like my friends' parents?" I froze. That question was surprisingly simple, yet it struck my heart like a hammer. I looked into her brown eyes, strangely similar to her mother's, and in those eyes I saw absolute trust. I smiled, a twisted smile. "Because Daddy made a mistake, but your Mommy chose to forgive, and Daddy chose never to make that mistake again." Grace didn't ask anything further. She just nodded as if she understood something beyond her age. Then she kissed my cheek and ran into the house. I sat there alone, holding a wrench, but my heart trembled as if I had just lost something sacred. That evening, I told Emily. She was silent for a long time, then asked, "Will you tell her?" "When she's older," I replied without hesitation. "When she's old enough to understand that a person can make mistakes, but still deserves to be loved if they change." Emily looked at me. That look wasn't from a former wife, but from a mother, and she said, "As long as you don't lie, she'll feel it." Some truths are not for children, but there are also scars that should be told, as a lesson. I used to be living proof that betrayal can destroy everything. Now I want to be proof that love, if brave enough, can heal everything. I haven't told our child everything yet, but I know someday I will. Not to justify, not to be forgiven again, but so my child knows. True love isn't perfect, but it's real. If you feel this part resonated with you, I can continue with part 11. When Grace is a teenager, and the truth can no longer be hidden. Tuyet voy, jai la bandich, tieng an kua joan truyen ban vua kung kap. Toy janko gang dik mot kech mot mava tunhien hat jefu, hop chovik chuyen joithan gyong noi. Grace just turned 14, that awkward age. The age when questions begin to be asked, not just to know, but to verify whether what parents taught was right or wrong. One Friday evening, I was in my study, reviewing a report for next week's meeting. The door was slightly ajar. Grace knocked softly, then stepped in. "Dad, are you busy?" "No, what is it, sweetie?" She sat down in the chair opposite, pulling the sleeves of her hoodie over her wrists, a habit when she was nervous. Then Grace said slowly, "I have an essay assignment for sociology. The topic is family, trust, and betrayal. I think I want to write about Our family. I put down my pen. Silence. What do you mean? I know about what happened between you and Mom. My eyes felt dry, but my throat tightened. Grace continued. I overheard Mom talking to Aunt Emma. That? Mom once forgave you for something very big. Then I pieced things together. You and Mom separated for a while. You always avoided talking about why. Mom always said, some mistakes you only understand when you grow up. I think I'm old enough now. I nodded. No denial, no evasion. I betrayed your mother. Grace didn't cry. She just looked at me, a gaze far beyond her 14 years. Why? I took a deep breath. Because I was foolish. Because I forgot what the most important thing in my life was. Because there are moments when people think they've lost love, so they chase after cheaper, easier affections. And I paid the price. Grace leaned back in the chair. I don't hate you, but I'm not sure I fully understand. You don't need to fully understand. You just need to remember, I made a mistake. Your mom forgave me. And from that day, I haven't made that mistake again. A tear fell from Grace's eye. She gave a faint smile. This essay will probably get a high score. That night, Grace and I stayed up until 1 a.m., not to talk about mistakes, but about how a person gets back up after making them. I told her everything, no hiding, but no dramatizing the tragedy either. We ended with a hug, not long, not dramatic, but enough for me to know. Grace understood. If you wish, I will continue with part 12. When I meet the woman from the past again, and the final question, if I could go back, would I do things differently? The city of Denver in late autumn was as beautiful as a painting. Golden leaves, red leaves, dry air, sunlight slanting gently through the long, quiet streets. I was here on a business trip, an annual conference my company sponsored. After the presentation, I quietly left the meeting room, looking for a nearby coffee shop to sit in until my late evening flight home. I ordered an espresso, opened my laptop, received a few emails from Grace asking about her essay deadline, smiled to myself, and then I heard a voice from behind. I wasn't sure if it was you. I turned around. It was her. Her name was Natalie. We hadn't had each other's numbers saved in our phones for over a decade. But how could I forget? She stood there, her hair shorter, thinner, and seemingly more subdued, but her eyes were still the same. That gaze I once thought was the difference. Hi, I said, standing up, maintaining a calm demeanor. It's been a long time. Yeah, 11 years. 12, I corrected, my voice as steady as if discussing business. Sit? She nodded. We sat. At first it was casual conversation about work, life, things that were so old they no longer evoked emotion. Then she looked at me, tilting her head. Are you okay? Really okay? I exhaled. I'm okay. Perhaps for the first time in my life, I'm truly okay. And then she asked, the question I thought would never come. If that day, I hadn't broken up with you, if I had chosen a different path, do you think we would have gone further? I looked into her eyes, the eyes that once blinded me, and I thought of my wife, who had forgiven. I thought of Grace, my daughter, who was stronger than I was back then. I thought of all the sleepless nights I endured just to learn how to be a decent man. I smiled. I think we went as far as we were supposed to go. Natalie was silent, then nodded, gently, without bitterness. I'm happy for you. Really. We left the coffee shop, no hug, no exchanging numbers, no promises at all. I watched her walk out of the intersection, disappear into the crowd, like a dream I once mistakenly dreamt. I don't need to go back to the past to know I was wrong. I just need to move past it, to know that I've grown. Grace is 16 this year. She's almost as tall as her mom, has long hair, and always wears AirPods. She's good at math, loves Donna Tartt's books, and can talk for hours about indie films on Letterboxd. One day, she came down the stairs with a strange smile. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. How do you know if a guy actually likes you, or he's just, like, enjoying the attention? I froze for exactly one heartbeat. I knew this question. I used to be that man. I used to be that jerk. I swallowed hard. Is someone making you feel like that? No, I mean, maybe. It's just a guy from school. He texts me a lot, but he flirts with, like, everyone, you know? I nodded, breathed out slowly. I was facing the greatest fear of my life, that one day my daughter would fall for someone like the old me. What could I tell her? That don't trust sweet words? Or don't give too much too soon? Then what? I did the worst thing to the woman I loved. How could I be qualified to advise anyone? But I looked at her, Grace. She had her mother's eyes and a heart stronger than mine. I chose to be honest, not with everything, but with the most important part. There are guys who like the game more than the person, who say the right things but don't stay when it matters. So how do I tell? I gave a sad smile. He'll show you. In the way he listens, in the way he respects your silence, in how he acts when no one's watching. You mean like how you act with mom? I paused. Yeah, I whispered. Exactly that. That night after Grace was asleep, I stood outside her room for a while. I thought about all the times I had failed as a man, a husband, a father. I also thought about all the times I had tried to make amends. And I prayed, not for Grace to find a perfect guy, but for her to be strong enough to leave someone who isn't worthy, no matter how much that person might resemble the old me. That's what I leave for her. Not advice, but choices, and the courage to choose again. Her name was Emily, the woman I once had an affair with, the one who made me lose myself, and then also allowed me to find myself again. I never contacted Emily again after that last day. No texts, no emails, nothing. We had agreed that if we wanted to keep the rest of our lives intact, we had to cut ties cleanly. And I did that for years until 3 months ago. One April afternoon, I was waiting for coffee at Starbucks when I heard someone call my name. Michael? I turned around, and there she was. Her hair was shorter, still those eyes gentle but full of unspoken things. Emily. We sat down, politely, a table's distance apart, no touching, nothing that went too far. Just two people who had made mistakes, sitting across from each other after many years apart. You look so different. You haven't changed much at all. She asked about Grace. I told her. I asked about her work. She told me. No mention of that incident. Neither of us needed to. Before leaving, she said, "Are you happy?" I nodded. This time, yes. She smiled, a genuine smile, and that was it. I didn't tell my wife about this. Not right away. Not because I had anything to hide, but because I was scared. I was afraid that just by hearing Emily's name, everything I had tried to rebuild over the years would crack. I was afraid my wife would look at me differently. I was afraid I myself wouldn't understand what was right. The worst part, she knew. Not because I told her, but because someone saw. A week later, my wife stood in the kitchen with her iPad, her face as cold as ice. You met Emily that day? I froze. No beating around the bush. Yes, but not like you think. I didn't arrange it. I didn't even... You didn't say anything at all. Her voice trembled, and I knew this was no longer about trust, but about hurt. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I hadn't trusted her enough to tell her. That night, we said nothing more. I slept on the sofa. All night, I thought about one thing. Honesty isn't about not making mistakes, but about not hiding, not even the smallest thing. The next morning, I made coffee and waited for her at the dining table. I'm ready to answer everything, no justification, no evasion. Just please don't let this become a new wound between us. She sat down, quietly, and for the first time in years, we began a real conversation. She herself suggested, we should try marriage counseling, not because you cheated, but because if you're still hiding something, you need to learn to open up. I agreed immediately. No hesitation. I was also tired of feeling secretive, even though I was no longer doing anything wrong. I was tired of feeling like I was still guilty, even though I had apologized, changed, and tried. The first counseling session was quite strange. A small room, cream-colored fabric sofas, a wooden coffee table, and a middle-aged woman with glasses holding a notebook. Her name was Diana. "So, who wants to start?" Both of us were silent for a moment. I was the first to speak. "I cheated. I tried to make amends. But now I realize I'm still the one who creates hurt, even if I'm not repeating it anymore." Diana didn't tell me I was right or wrong. She asked, "Have you forgiven yourself?" I laughed. "I don't have that right." "You don't have the right, or you don't allow yourself to have the right?" That question silenced me. The truth was, I always thought I didn't deserve it, didn't deserve my wife's kindness, didn't deserve my family, didn't deserve a second chance. I lived as if I always had to atone, and that inadvertently distanced me from her. In the third session, it was Grace's turn to speak. "I forgive him. I was angry. I was hurt. At times I wanted to give up everything, but I forgive. The only thing I need is for him to stop living as if he's serving a suspended sentence." That statement hit me straight in the heart. I had never looked at things from that perspective. I was punishing myself instead of living, to love again, the right way. Diana said, "Atonement is not about carrying a burden forever. It's about knowing you made a mistake and living so you never make it again." I nodded. And for the first time, I felt tears in my eyes. Not from guilt, but from relief. We went home after the fifth session, hand in hand. No one said anything. Just the atmosphere was lighter. She leaned her head on my shoulder when the car stopped at a red light. I put my hand on hers and she squeezed it back. We had walked through hell and were learning how to walk out of it together. October 16th. That was our wedding day. 9 years ago, I stood in a small church in suburban Charlottesville, Virginia, trembling like a leaf, waiting for the girl I thought was the only one. And she truly was the only one, in a way I would only understand much later. We decided not to do anything grand. No party, no wine, no five-star restaurant. Just us together. And a small table at the Italian place down the street, where we used to eat on the day we got the keys to our first apartment. Grace wore a light pink dress, her hair softly tied to the side. She didn't wear much makeup, but when she walked out of the bedroom, I was speechless. "You're looking at me like, this is the first time," I smiled, because it genuinely feels that way. We had dinner in a light atmosphere. No more awkwardness, not trying to act normal, like in the years after the shock. We talked about work, old friends, even about those counseling sessions that startled us because we had never understood each other so deeply. "Do you think we'll make it to our 10th year?" Grace asked as she sipped her wine. "If it's the U.S. we are now, then maybe even 30. After dinner, we walked through the old park. The autumn wind was light, yellow street lights casting shadows on the falling leaves. We said nothing, just walked, side by side. I reached out my hand, for the first time in a long while, like a boy flirting. She looked, then placed her hand in mine, and this time, we held hands as if starting anew. For the first time in years, I was no longer afraid. Not afraid of her gaze, not afraid of the past returning, not afraid I would make a mistake again. Because I was no longer the man I used to be, and she was no longer the wife who only forgave in silence. We were two people, once hurt, once fallen, but chose to get back up for each other. "Do you believe in love again?" I asked as the wind rustled through the tree branches above us. "Yes, but it's a love that knows how fragile it is, so it holds on even tighter." If you want me to continue writing, part 17 will be, "Someone from the past unexpectedly returns, and I have to choose whether or not to hide it from my wife." I thought it was all in the past, but life doesn't grant anyone complete peace, especially when what you've done is still known to others. One afternoon, I received a handwritten letter. No name, no return address, just a few lines. "You think everything can be erased? I have the clip. If Grace knew, how long do you think she'd stay with you?" I froze, cold sweat. Who was it? Was it her? Was it one of the people who knew at the office? I intended to stay silent, but this silence began to kill me again. That evening, Grace asked me, "What's wrong with you? Stressed about work again?" I nodded, didn't dare look straight into my wife's eyes, because I was still hiding a part of the truth. She knew about the affair, yes, but she didn't know it lasted longer than she thought, that there was a clip, and that it could destroy everything. I didn't sleep that night. I knew. If I stayed silent, I'd lose her. If I spoke, I might also lose her. But the next morning, Grace was already awake. She placed a cup of coffee on the table and a letter. I opened it. I know. I knew even before you proposed again. But I chose to stay silent because I wanted to believe you could make it work. I didn't expect, even now, you still can't be honest. Grace left home after that day. No anger, no tears, just quietly packed her things and said just one sentence. Some wounds don't need to be screamed to become permanent. I collapsed. A man who once had everything and lost everything for the second time, this time with no one left to forgive. A month later, I received the divorce papers. No asset claims, no disputes, just one note. I'm keeping your last name, not because I still care, but because I needed to remind myself never to forgive so easily again. The end. It's now winter in Boston, where I've moved to live alone. No one by my side. No one asking, "Are you home yet?" Every night I sit in front of my computer, writing this story, not to gain anyone's sympathy, but so that people like me don't repeat this mistake. Infidelity is not a mistake, it is a choice. And that choice destroyed the only woman who ever chose to stay by my side after everything.